Hey folks, my name is Ivo, this is Super High Boy, and today we're talking about Bioshock, the trilogy.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture.
Before we start, quick announcement. Video is a bit broken because I had some technical difficulties, but for today's video there's going to be audio, and the audio is in a pretty good quality. So yeah, let's go for it. Before we start, as usual, let's look at some statistics for the games. So today we're talking about 3 games: Bioshock 1, Bioshock 2, and the Bioshock Infinite, or let's call it Bioshock 3. First game was developed by Irrational Games, and 2K helped. Then 2K took over for Bioshock 2, and Irrational Games came back for Bioshock 3. Each game will take roughly 12 hours to beat, depending on your performance and depending on how much you want to kind of achieve the completionist level. And to be honest, they're gonna be a trip. This is, as I would call it, a pretty good weekend if you sit down and just go through the games if you have never played before. Bioshock 1 was released in August 2007. And this is like 12-year-old game, but do not worry, there's a remastered version which kind of ups the graphics. Bioshock 2 was released in February of 2010, 3 years after the first one, and again you can enjoy a remastered version. And finally, Bioshock 3 was released in March of 2013, and this game I think is still pretty freaking gorgeous to look and play. So let's get to the reviews. Okay, so some of you might notice that there's a similarity in the name between Bioshock and System Shock. And let's look at what are the similarities. Both start in a medial section of their related environments. Both have endless respawning enemies, though very few at a time, usually just 1 or 2. So you can never relax, even when you're killed every enemy in a section. Both start off with you relying on the melee attacks to kill the enemies. Though this is more prevalent in System Shock 2, since the game is much harder and is more survival horror than Bioshock. Both have very good atmosphere, though it's not pleasant in either case. And both have RPG elements, though Bioshock are much less pronounced than System Shocks 2. Both are very good games, both have played very differently from one another. System Shock 2 requires more thought and is less of a shooter than Bioshock, and obviously much older, so that kind of makes sense. So it fits more in the puzzle genre. Ammunitions are scarcer, so it's a bit harder and you need to kind of think about what you're doing. And it generally is a slower paced game than Bioshock. On the other hand, both have a form of special abilities, while in Bioshock you kind of get those and you can use them. In System Shock you need to be thinking more about where you put your points, because there's an RPG element to it. So what is Bioshock about? Generally speaking, imagine a super big genius guy, the name of Andrew Ryan, decided that one day he was fed up with all the political regimes around the world, and he said these are stopping advancement of the human population. So what he said was, you know what, I'm gonna gather all the smart people and I'm gonna put them in this one city and they can be smart there. And this is pretty much the premise of your Bioshock 1. It's a guy decided to build a city type of thing. Obviously when this game starts, you'll realize pretty fast that this is not the case. The game then takes a turn, and I will avoid any form of spoilers in this particular review, due to the fact that this game is designed for you to play throughout, and then right at the end, it's like a punch when the big reveal kind of shows up. Regarding Bioshock 2, it kind of differs in the sense that it's a more political story, and I'll not get much into it. But what it changes from Bioshock 1 is that now there's a moral choice, which was much different in the sense of the impact was much bigger. And then we have Bioshock 3, which in the sense of the story is now we move away from Rapture and we're actually now in Columbia, a completely different city up in the sky, where we are following I wouldn't say a cult leader, but pretty much a cult leader, and how that has basically happened there, or what's the difference between Rapture and Columbia. And then obviously, just like Bioshock 1 and 2, big turn, big review. So, what's my opinion? Here, I'll divide the section in like 3 subsections, because obviously 3 games. Everything before kind of summed up all the 3 games. So, let's start with Bioshock 1, alright? So, Bioshock 1 for me is a difficult game. Why? Because when it came out, I didn't play it. I didn't play it for few reasons. First, I didn't have the machine to run it, because I was super young at the time. And then, secondly, it was just scary. Like, that initial sequence where a splicer climbs on the pod you enter Rapture in is just insane. Saying that, I tried coming back to it a few times, but couldn't. And then when Bioshock 2 dropped, I was like, okay, I need to sit down, I need to play through the first one, and then I need to play through the second one, because this is obviously a successful game, reviews are pretty good. So, you know what? I'm gonna do it. So I remember sitting down and going through the first game, and maybe the first whole half of it, I just did not enjoy it. And the more time passed and the more friends I spoke about it, the more I noticed that it's a similar trend. People generally did not enjoy Bioshock as much as I do after finishing it. So I think Bioshock 1 is really, really good game, but you do need to kind of get into it. You need to get familiar with Rapture. You need to get familiar with all the characters. Because this game does excel at making you feel for even the villains. And everything becomes familiar, and everything becomes an emotional attachment, and you are now invested into the story. Saying this, I would like to move now to Bioshock 2, where Bioshock 2, I started playing, now finished Bioshock 1, super hyped. And I instantly noticed one major thing, and this was, oh, this is a good game. This is even arguably a better game. I think in general reviews are lower for Bioshock 2, and I think this is because mostly of the story. But if you play the game, mechanically speaking, I think there's a lot of improvements over Bioshock 1. Simple as, oh, you can have my special abilities in one hand and my weapon on the other, and I can use both type of thing. Which sounds small, but it was pretty good. Arguably, Bioshock 2 can be cheesed due to some of the plasmids being overpowered, but that's fine. On the other hand, how do you top Bioshock 1? Bioshock 1 was a game that came in the FPS genre in 2007, when FPS has become stale, and refreshed it, gave it new life. And then Bioshock 2 had to somehow top this, which was pretty hard. And I think it doesn't succeed in that, final punchline. But what it does good is that there's a moral choice you need to make throughout the game. And that does feel like there's an impact at the end. Which is pretty good. Not the same impact as the reveal of Would You Kindly or the story of Andrew Ryan, but I'm not spoiling those for you. So, yeah, Bioshock 2 is pretty good. I did enjoy it at the time, and arguably if you would have asked me back then which was my favorite, Bioshock 1 or Bioshock 2, I would have probably said Bioshock 2. But then again, now thinking about it, going back to them, I think Bioshock 1 was just generally the better story, the better environment, and that feeling of first time exposing to Rapture was great. And moving into Bioshock 3. So here, I'm gonna put a big spoiler warning because this game needs spoiling. If you want it reviewed, you need to spoil it. Reason being is that this game, at the time it came out, 2013, was very generic, in my opinion. A lot of people at the time also kind of stated the same thing. They said, oh, you know, it's a game where you play and you have like these special abilities and then you shoot some enemies and you move from section to section and you pretty much clear all the enemies and that's pretty much it. It's true though, it did not improve on anything that Bioshock 1 or 2 did more like 5 years before. And at the time, the industry caught up, so FPS shooters similar to Bioshock 1 and 2 were already out. So, what Bioshock 3 did was, it did prepare you. So, Bioshock 1 and 2, they were based on that final scene. They were based on that final punchline and going for, this is their big reveal. And Bioshock 1 did that amazingly well. Bioshock 2 struggled, but still did it pretty well. While Bioshock 3 had to somehow top this. And oh my god, did it do it, right? It was so fucking amazing going through that final section, revealing that Columbia and the story of Booker and Elizabeth was tied to Rapture and Andrew Ryan. This is amazing. And then the DLC, which... let me say this right here, right now. I don't buy DLCs. I do not support the idea of having games being extended a lot more after a game's release. Saying this, I mean, Witcher 3, I know its DLCs were freaking amazing, but saying this here as well, Buried at Sea was freaking amazing. But in general, I think when a game comes out, it should be done. Maybe release a mini game afterwards, a small indie title for like, I don't know, 10 quid or like $10 or whatever. And people can play this, and I would gladly buy this as a separate title, but I do not appreciate DLC content. And a lot of people might be against this, but in general, I don't like DLCs. Saying this, I freaking loved Buried at Sea. Reason being that having that noir feeling of Elizabeth down at Rapture was just amazing. Story tied more to Bioshock 1 and 2, made the ending of Bioshock 3 even more connected throughout the world. It was just marvelous. So, yeah, are Bioshock games good? I think they're pretty freaking good. They're probably one of the best games I've ever played. I even got like Jack's tattoo, and you can Google that yourself, because I think nothing in that period of time between like 2007 2014 can top Bioshock, for me at least. So yeah, pretty good games. So how good is Bioshock Trilogy? Well, this is an amazing game. The world is absolutely captivating. The story is amazing, and it can be compared probably to Shyamalan movie in early 90s. Is it worth buying a collector's edition of? Absolutely. Can you find a collector's edition of a 12-year-old game and 10-year-old game and like 6-year-old game? Probably not, but definitely buy on Steam, have them in your collection, and maybe when you have the time, just sit down and go through all 3 games, because they will have a major impact on you. So this was my opinion on the Bioshock Trilogy. If you agree with me, please comment below. If you do not agree with me, please again comment below, and I shall try to get into a conversation with you. So this was the review for this week, and I shall see you next week. See ya!